My name is Isabel, and I grew up in a small town near Mississippi. It was very cold there, and everyone knew everyone else. As a child, I thought I had a normal family. My mother was a nursing student, and my father worked night shifts as a hospital security guard. We weren't rich, but we lived in our own small comfort zone. I used to be an only child, and for a brief time, I thought I was loved the way every child deserves to be. Mom used to brush my hair before I went to school, and Dad took me to the park every weekend. On summer nights, the three of us would sit on the porch eating ice cream and listening to the cicadas in the still night air. I believed that this was what a warm family was made of. But it all ended one freezing January night, just after I turned 8. I was awakened in the middle of the night by urgent knocking and flashing headlights in the driveway. My Aunt Lucy came into the house, her face pale, telling me to grab a coat and a few things. Mom was in the hospital, she said. My baby sister was born 2 months early and needed special care. I was too young to really understand what was happening, but I knew one thing. Nothing was the same after that night. They named her Luna, a small red shape surrounded by tubes and machines, lying silently inside an incubator. I wasn't allowed near her. "We can't risk her getting sick," her mother said, her eyes fixed on the heart monitor. When I reached out to touch her hand, she gently pushed me away, as if I, too, were a threat. From the moment Luna arrived home, everything revolved around her. Our house became a sterile zone. Sanitizer in every room, air purifiers running nonstop, and the smell of bleach was so strong that I would wake up in the middle of the night with a burning throat. Whenever I coughed or even sneezed, my mother would pack me up and send me to Grandma's house. At first, I thought it was a treat. Grandma made amazing apple pie and always saved a new book for me. But I slowly learned that I wasn't welcome in my own home. I was seen as a potential risk to Luna, the precious one in whom all their hopes were pinned. I got a perfect score on my first math test in 3rd grade. I took it home expecting my mom to tape it to the fridge like she usually did. She looked at the paper and turned to ask Dad if he remembered to buy tissues, because Luna looked a little congested. And Dad just nodded and said, "Good job." No hug, not even a real smile. That was it. I tried everything to win their attention back. I drew pictures, I won first place in the school science fair, I told Mom about all the fascinating things I read in books. But every effort was rejected with the same excuse. Luna has a slight fever, Luna is sleeping, Luna needs to rest. Isabel, please be quiet. I gradually learned to become invisible. I stayed alone in my room, which always smelled of peppermint oil, the only smell that bothered Luna. So she was not allowed in. It was the only space that felt like mine, where I began to delve into art history, antiques, and the imagined worlds behind each ancient painting. But what hurt more than being ignored was when they began to rewrite the past. Isabel has always been strong and independent, Mom told the neighbors when I entered the gifted program. She understands that Luna needs more care. No, I didn't understand. I only knew that I once had a family, and then one day, she disappeared without warning. Slowly, I realized that expectations were never meant for me. Hugs of praise, even just a proud look from my parents, all of that was for Luna. I didn't need those things, they thought. Isabel is the kind of girl who takes care of herself, Mom would say when someone asked about me. But being independent doesn't mean you don't need love. In 8th grade, I applied for a job at a diner in town called Mr. Jones. The owner, Mrs. Lorraine, was the first person outside my family who saw value in me. She never asked why a 13-year-old girl wanted to scrub floors and sell candy after school. She just put her hand on my shoulder and said, "If you work hard, you'll deserve a place in the world." I've never forgotten that. Every day after school, I'd go to the diner, tie my hair up, and start bussing tables, washing trays, and taking orders. At home, I did my homework in silence at my little desk in the corner of my room. No one ever asked where I was when I got back or what I was doing, as long as I didn't start drinking beer. Luna was different. She never had to work, she never had to clean her books, and she certainly never set foot in a cafeteria except to buy snacks occasionally. Every time Luna had a group event or church performance, the whole family would show up with flowers and a video camera. Even when I got a perfect score on the SAT, Mom would just mumble, "That's good," as she cut up fruit for Luna because she's low in vitamin C. As a senior, I applied to 12 colleges. I didn't tell anyone that I quietly wrote essays during my lunch breaks and had Ms. Lorraine proofread them. She even taught me how to write from the heart. She said I got my own letters of recommendation, filled out my financial aid applications, and figured out the FAFSA all by myself. Every step I took was quiet and solitary, but never hesitant. I didn't expect my parents to pay for my college, so I applied for every scholarship I could find. Merit-based, need-based, first generation. Every line of every application was my silent rebellion against being overlooked. I worked all summer, saved every tip, and even put pennies in a piggy bank to buy a bus ticket to a scholarship interview in the next state. Then, one spring afternoon, as I was wiping down the cafeteria counter as usual, I got an email informing me that I had been accepted to Northwestern University on a full scholarship. I stood frozen in the sweet, buttery aroma of cookies, eyes burning, smiling uncontrollably. Mrs. Lorraine hugged me like I was her own granddaughter. It was the first time I had cried because someone was truly proud of me. That night, I brought the acceptance letter home and showed it to Mom. She looked at it and set it on the table. "Congratulations, but don't tell Luna. She's been stressed lately." I nodded, folded the paper and put it in my pocket, and headed upstairs while Luna giggled downstairs about her new ballet slippers from that boutique I'd never dared to go into. A few weeks later, the whole family had a little party because Luna had won second place in a school art contest. Dad had even hung her drawing in the living room with a sign that said, "The Family Talent." I looked at the picture of a pink cat standing on a rainbow. Then back to my essay, praised as exceptional, beyond expectations by a college professor, now hidden in my desk drawer. That was when I knew that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the kid who didn't cause trouble. And Luna, no matter how ordinary, would always be the special one. But this time, I had the key to get out. And I swore I would become someone they could never ignore again. I chose to major in art history at Northwestern, partly out of passion and partly because I no longer wanted to let anyone else make my choices for me. Lectures on European dynasties, Art Deco, and the symbolism of antique jewelry brought back memories of my grandmother, who used to let me sort through boxes of brooches, necklaces, and earrings whenever I was sent to her house. I still remember a swan-shaped hairpin with pale purple stones. At the time, I didn't know if it was valuable. Just the way the light caught the jewel took my breath away. I spent hours at the window staring at it as if it were a treasure. I now know that the way we look at an antique isn't just fascination. It's instinct, a kind of intuition, the only one I could trust. Graduating with honors, I landed an unpaid internship at a small jewelry appraisal firm in Chicago, working mostly with local auction houses. While my friends were running off to big media or finance companies, I quietly donned white gloves, bent over a magnifying glass, and photographed every tiny scratch on my rings. No one else at the time knew that these no-name pieces would change my life. The first big change came from a brooch listed as costume jewelry, the kind that might be worth a few $dozen. I didn't know why, but the moment I picked it up, something clicked. The design was simple, but the details were exquisite. The edges were finely engraved, the enamel was flawless, and on the back, there was a small, almost worn-out mark. I spent all night researching the mark. It turned out that it belonged to a French artisan who used to make jewelry for the nobility in the early 20th century, before his workshop was destroyed during the war. The brooch was not only authentic, it was incredibly rare. I presented my findings at a small meeting with my supervisors. I spoke not out of pride, but with all my passion. I supported my assessment with design comparisons from archival documents, and even asked a friend from the university library to help me access a museum database for original records. As a result, the brooch was revalued with an initial value of $12,000, and when it went up for auction at the Seattle Antiques showroom, it sold for over $40,000. That was the first time my name appeared in the company email with a brief line of praise. "Isabel has a keen eye." I continued working as if nothing had happened, but more and more misvalued pieces began to accidentally fall into my hands. Once it was a cloisonné enamel necklace that was thought to be a reproduction but turned out to be an original by a 19th century Russian artist. Another time, a platinum wedding band was mistaken for a generic bridal piece. It was actually a limited design, one of only 30 made for a historic Boston family anniversary. I began to be trusted with larger collections. My supervisor, Elisa, invited me to lunch for the first time. As I cut into a pie, she said, "Isabel, have you ever thought about going alone?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. Me, the girl who worked without pay for 2 years and survives on instant noodles? She tilted her head, her eyes sharp. Exactly. The hungriest people find the rarest meals. Her words stayed with me. I began taking on small checking jobs. Pawn shops, family-run antique shops, places that couldn't afford big companies. I charged less, but I didn't leave any detail unchecked, patient, careful, never skipping a single step. One night, I went back to my rundown fourth-floor apartment, opened the closet, and looked at the notebook my grandmother had left me. On the first page, in messy handwriting, it read, "It's not the rare item. It's the girl who treasures it." I understood. If I had once been invisible in my own home, now every piece I touched was how I redefined myself, and I vowed never again to let anyone misjudge me, just as I had never misjudged the true value of a hidden gem buried beneath the dust of time. I started my own business in the fall of my 27th year. No one knew, not that anyone asked. My family still thought I was working some temp job somewhere, as if my entire career had been just a break between Luna's constant big moves. I rented a small office on the second floor of an old building above a psychology clinic. The office was only 300 square feet, with a rickety wooden desk propped up on a file box, a chair I'd salvaged from the trash and thoroughly cleaned, and a second-hand lamp from a flea market. Every time I turned on the lamp, it made a faint clicking sound, as if even it wasn't sure about my dream. I called the company Gold Bloom, because to me it reminds me of gold blooming. The beginning was tough. I worked with small clients, an elderly lady who wanted to check her engagement ring from the Great Depression, a local antique dealer who needed to distinguish real platinum from a plated mix. I charged less than the big firms, but my work was meticulous, right down to microscopy of gemstones and tracing their historical provenance. My reputation began to grow. One referral turned into two. Then came the calls from estate attorneys, private collectors, and even a small regional museum that needed help appraising an inherited set of jewelry that had never been professionally examined. In my second year, I moved to a larger office. This time it was on the ground floor, with a glass front and a proper sign, still not far from the psychology clinic. I hired my first employee, Olivia, a bright-eyed recent geology graduate with an incredible patience for tiny stones. I taught her how to examine gemstone cuts under filament bulbs, how to spot signs of craftsmanship with the naked eye, and most importantly, how to trust her intuition. Things grew faster than I expected. By year 5, I had 3 operating offices in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Denver. We served clients on both coasts, with authentication contracts for multimillion-dollar auctions, and specialized in forgotten collections found in storage rooms, safes, and attics. My net worth at the time was over $12 million, not including nearly $1 million more in pending authentication contracts. I still lived in a small house in the suburbs, drove a neutral-tone silver SUV, and used an old-fashioned phone, not because I was frugal, but because I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. My family still had no idea. To them, I was just Isabel, the stubborn daughter who refused to take a steady office job, made her living dealing with old things, and always missed dinner because she was probably busy dusting antiques again. I still went to Sunday dinners, still listened to my mother talk about how Luna had just changed her major for the 4th time, this time to animal behavior psychology, and how she might have finally found her passion. Still, my father suggested I apply for a job at the local high school, because they have good insurance. They still watched Luna scroll through Instagram mid-conversation, showing off a new designer bag she claimed was from a sale, though one glance told me it was a limited edition piece that had never been discounted anywhere. Whenever they asked me what I was doing, I just gave them a soft smile, the same as always. A little authentication work, some vintage pieces. No one asked for details. No one noticed that the pearl necklace I wore had belonged to an Edwardian British noblewoman, or that the ruby hair clip was a rare early 20th century design. They assumed they were flea market items that I hadn't bothered to fix. Luna once joked over dinner, "ISA probably has enough necklaces to open a shop." I smiled, poured myself some orange juice, and said, "Who knows, right?" I could have told them everything, that I was behind some of the biggest authentication cases in the region, that my company had just signed a contract with the National Museum and I had been invited to write for a leading gemology magazine, that the bracelet Luna was wearing was a fake. But I didn't, because sometimes silence is the only crown the forgetful can wear without asking permission. I started sending money to my parents at the end of my 5th year of business. It started at $3,000 a month, and then went up to 5 when Luna's sudden academic expenses increased after switching to her 5th major, this time in interior design. Coincidentally, the same field I had dreamed of but couldn't pursue because my family couldn't afford it. Mom called me one weekend night, her voice lowering after a few polite thanks. Luna is really finding herself, but tuition at Parsons isn't cheap, and your dad's salary as a security guard can't cover it all. I was at my desk reviewing documents for a $400,000 antique jewelry appraisal, nodding as if I were thinking about a discounted loaf of bread. "Can you help me out a little?" she asked after a brief pause. I asked in response, "How much do you need per month?" $7,000. But only for a while. After Luna graduates, she'll help the whole family. I didn't mention that Luna hadn't completed any programs in the past 6 years. I didn't ask why they hadn't suggested she apply for scholarships or part-time jobs. Instead, I opened my business account and set up an automatic monthly transfer of $7,000 under the label child support. Every time the money went out, I reminded myself, not because they deserve it, but because I can do it. Not everyone can. I kept pretending not to hear Mom telling the neighbors that Isabel lives so frugally that she basically eats canned soup and rides the bus. Pretending not to see Luna posting vacation photos from Cabo with the caption, "I deserve this after a tough semester." One Sunday dinner, I had just finished cutting into a slice of roast when Luna looked at me with a half smile. "I thought I'd get an MBA. Maybe it'll help with your little antique shop job." Mom didn't laugh. She nodded thoughtfully. "She's right. Everyone has a master's degree now. If you went back to school, you could find a better job." I sat still and took a sip of water. The glass was slightly cloudy, and in my mind was the project for the new gallery in New York that I just signed the contract for last week, a $2,500,000 project, and I was responsible for authenticating every piece of jewelry. But they didn't need to know. They never wanted to. Luna still believed she was living off my parents' savings. Once, at her boyfriend's birthday party, after a few drinks, she blurted out to her friends, "My sister has no idea why she's still chasing all those dusty old things." My parents still help her pay the rent out of pity. One of her friends, who happened to be a former client of mine, later told me exactly what she said. I remember laughing when I heard that, not out of sadness, not anger, just emptiness. The kind of emptiness that comes from standing at the top and looking down, only to see your family still at the bottom of the mountain, not wanting to climb but demanding you throw them a rope. I was silent, just like those old things I once found buried in piles of trash. Sometimes, silence is what makes something truly rare. But things started to change when Luna bought a new car, a limited edition BMW sports car. She posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Rewarding myself after a tough semester. Hard work always pays off." That car, I knew, cost over $90,000. And I also didn't know that a Parsons student could afford it without silent financing. That day, Mom called to me in a voice full of pride. "Have you seen Luna doing so well? She's taking care of everything on her own now. She really has the potential to be successful." I fell silent again, but this time there was no patience left in me. Only one clear question echoing in my mind. When would they finally see me, not the faded shadow they'd cast? I hadn't planned on hosting Thanksgiving that year. Honestly, I was planning on disappearing somewhere by myself. But then my mom called, sounding more frail than usual. "I haven't been feeling well, Isabel. No one's really in the mood to cook this year. Everyone's looking forward to the holiday. You know how it is." I knew it. Looking forward to a dinner that no one remembers cooking, but that everyone would remember if I didn't show up. I paused for a few seconds before answering, "I'll take care of it. You get some rest." I had actually contacted a high-end catering service in Chicago, the same one I used for my company's auction events. They specialized in private dining for collectors, offering custom menus where every dish was a work of art, from the plating to the dressing. I paid for everything with my company's secondary card. No one knew. Not yet. On Thanksgiving, my family arrived at my house. The catering team arrived early and followed an hour later with silver portable ovens, platters, and even a professional table designer. Luna caught a glimpse of them and whispered to her mother, "Isn't she overdoing it a little? It looks like she's trying to impress someone." I smiled a little. Impress? I had no one else to impress. I just wanted a real meal. No dry turkey, no mashed potatoes. No gravy so salty you had to swallow water between bites. Dinner was served on time, with nearly 20 people packed into the house. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, distant relatives, and of course Luna and her new boyfriend, who were all amazed by each dish. I didn't say anything, just smiled and watched the waiter pour the wine. I offered the meal and silently went upstairs to my old space to monitor a live auction taking place in Tokyo. A longtime client of mine was bidding on a rare set of Magiera gemstones. I couldn't afford to be distracted, so I opened my laptop, started the authentication software, and tracked the bids while staying connected to my assistant by Bluetooth headset. Then Lily walked in without knocking. "Do you have an iPhone charger?" "My phone's battery is dying," she asked without waiting for an answer, her eyes already fixed on the laptop's glowing screen where graphs and pictures lit up. Her eyes widened, so I looked at her and she gave me a slight smile. "Imagine if I borrowed your laptop. We'll show everyone just how cool your little antique work is." Before I could get up, she grabbed the laptop and headed straight for the living room where everyone was. "Look what Isabel is doing for Thanksgiving," she yelled as I ran after her. "Look." She swiveled the screen around for everyone to see. No one said a word, the open tabs revealing a bank account with a balance of $15,800,000, an authentication contract for $600,000, and the latest internal quarterly report clearly stating the company's profits at over $8 million. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence where you could hear a fork scrape the edge of a plate. Mom broke it first. She gave a small laugh, forced a bite of turkey, and then shook her head. "Come on. Isabel is probably just helping someone with paperwork, honey." I took a deep breath and straightened the sleeves of my coat. "No, Mom, I'm the one signing these contracts. I'm the CEO of Goldblum. My company operates 3 offices in 3 states specializing in antique jewelry and heritage asset authentication. Everything you're seeing is real." Someone dropped a spoon. Aunt Evelyn's jaw dropped open. Dad wiped the sweat from his forehead. And then Luna said, "You have that kind of money and you didn't tell us?" "Luna, you're still studying. I've been transferring $7,000 to our parents every month for over 2 years and you've never wondered where it came from?" Her face turned pale. My father turned around. His eyes were red. He started crying. "I have the right to know that," she screamed, her voice. Then Luna said tremblingly, "I'm your sister. Family should share." I looked at her and everyone there, those who once rejected me, looked down on me, while I was living off my own hard work. Then I said softly, but clearly, family doesn't mean carrying the people who always look down on you. I closed the laptop and walked towards the door. Behind me someone shouted something about obligations and duties, but I didn't turn around. All I could hear was the steady beating of my heart, like the ticking of an old gold watch, still working perfectly despite the dust and time. No one resisted. No one said, "Isabel, we're proud of you." No congratulations, no. Not a single genuine smile. After a long period of silence, the first thing I heard was my mother's voice, as sharp as a punch to the chest. "You have millions of dollars and you still let your parents fight. Did you even think about your sister?" I didn't get the chance to respond before Luna screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I deserve to know. I'm your sister. You kept everything a secret and just sat there watching us suffer." "Suffering?" I let out a short laugh. "You call flying business class, wearing a Cartier watch, and buying a BMW suffering?" My father, who had been silent until then, slammed his hand on the table. "No matter what you do, you're still family. Families share. You should be ashamed of yourself for keeping this a secret." I looked around the table. His eyes weren't the eyes of someone who loved me. They were looking at me like I was a safe that had just been broken into. "I sent you $7,000 a month for 2 years. Every time you called me crying that you couldn't make it, I never asked why I didn't set any conditions. I just sent the money quietly. And this is how you treat me. Then why didn't you say anything?" My mother replied, "Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't want us to depend on you, or because you wanted to keep it all to yourself. I gripped the wine bottle tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. Because I got used to being ignored since Luna was born, I stopped being a priority. Every award I won, every test I aced, every time I passed. Everything I did didn't matter. Because your sister needed a break, my mother said. I looked straight at my mother. Do you remember when I got an A on the SAT? Or when I got an A on the scholarship? And Dad, do you remember my graduation? No one came. Everyone was too busy watching Luna's preschool ballet recital. I was shaking. And now, the moment you find out that I did something none of you ever believed I could do, your first reaction is anger, because I didn't share it? That's not it. Luna interrupted. I'm shocked. I feel like I've been betrayed by you. You didn't trust me. I turned to my sister, my voice low. You never trusted me? You always saw me as the shadow behind you. You made fun of my work in front of your friends, told them that I lived off Mom and Dad while I was the one paying for every semester you studied, paying for the vacations you bragged about. Luna froze, her eyes wide. She hadn't expected me to know everything. Isabel, I'm not trying to fight, but you can't amass that kind of fortune and expect everyone to act like nothing has changed, my mother said. Her voice was shaking. The family needs help. You could start a fund for Luna. She wants to open her own interior design office. You mean, use my money to finance a dream that was never realized? I opened my purse, grabbed my phone, pressed a few buttons, and said firmly, I just canceled the automatic transfers. The room exploded and my mother yelled, Isabel, you can't do this. Your father and I were counting on this. Lily didn't even finish her degree. Then it's time to start working to pay for your own degree. I've been on my own since I was 17. If I could do this, the rest of you can too. If the only reason someone wants to keep me in their life is for the money, then I'm sorry. But I'm done buying love, and I don't need it anymore. I walked out as whispers were heard behind me. Someone mentioned a lawyer, someone else said they would regret it, but as I closed that heavy wooden door behind me, the only thing I felt was relief. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about choosing myself. That night in my apartment, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls flooded my cell phone screen. The first ones were from my mother. Isabel, you're making everything worse. We need to talk. Luna is falling apart. Can't you see she's lost all faith? Family is where you come back to, not where you leave. And then my colder, more measured father. I don't know what kind of person you've become, but that's not how you treat family. The 10th message was from Luna. You're ruining everything. You're going to regret this. I hung up the phone and placed it face down on the desk, as if that would somehow make the storm pass. But the next day, the company's emails started getting spammed, mostly from names that were very familiar, even from uncles and distant relatives. I hired a lawyer. His name was Josh. He had represented some of my VIP clients in real estate disputes. When I gave him the string of messages, his face didn't change, he just nodded. You need a cleansing. I'll draft the cease and desist letters today, and we'll send official notices to everyone on the list demanding that they stop all forms of harassment, threats, or financial requests. I asked Marcus to include a short line, not in legalese, but in plain human language. If love exists, it should never come with a bill. A week later, Luna posted a long, cryptic message on social media that began, Not everyone with money has a good heart. Along with the caption were old photos, me holding her as a baby at her high school graduation, me smiling at her 17th birthday dinner. The post reads like an emotional accusation, designed to garner sympathy. In the comments, some called me cold-hearted. Others asked why someone who was working on an MBA was using photos from 8 years ago to play the victim. I didn't respond. I simply opened an old wooden box in my closet and took out the vintage necklace Grandma Sarah had given me when I was 15. A single pearl hung silently in faded gold. I clasped it around my neck. It was like putting on the piece of memory that had kept me strong all these years. Grandma was the only one in the family I hadn't blocked. When I called and told her everything, she wasn't surprised. She just sighed. You finally did what you should have done a long time ago. I kept quiet. She continued in a slow but firm voice, Isabel. Family isn't the people who pull you back when you're trying to fly. You've lived in their shadow for long enough. It was time to choose your own light. The following week, I invited her to stay with me for a few days. She arrived with a small suitcase and a tin of shortbread cookies she had baked herself. We sat in the living room examining a collection of jewelry I had just acquired from Switzerland, and she taught me how to tell the real from the fake with instinct. She smiled as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. I changed all my phone numbers. My personal address was erased from the company system. My receptionist was instructed not to admit anyone claiming to be family without an appointment. I signed a lease for a new office in a secure complex, complete with security guards and biometric entry. One Monday morning, as I was drinking coffee and reviewing an exhibition layout, Josh called. "It seems things have gone quiet, at least on paper." I just smiled, because I knew the silence wasn't acceptance, it was reluctance, but that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need them to acknowledge who I was. I just needed to stop asking for permission to be myself. My grandmother once told me, "A true gem doesn't need to scream to prove its worth. It just needs to not be buried among the rocks." Now I had been put in the right frame of mind, and I would never let anyone drag me back into the shadows again. I moved into my new home in early March. A modest mid-century style villa on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin, overlooking Lake Monona. Nothing flashy, but quiet and private. It had a perimeter security fence, AI-integrated surveillance cameras, and a jewelry vault designed like a bank-grade safe. I set up everything in my new office by hand. A warm amber desk lamp, a soft leather chair, and a vintage mahogany bookcase I'd bought at a closing bookstore. The smell reminded me of childhood afternoons reading Nancy Drew in Grandma's attic. For the first time in my life, I was living in a space where I didn't have to shrink, didn't have to diminish my own success to make others feel comfortable. No more half sneers or half disapproving glances from my mother, no more sarcastic comments from Luna like, "That necklace looks like it's from Target." No more Sunday dinners where I had to pretend to be normal. I was completely myself. And that was enough to fill every empty space. To my surprise, the company was even stronger after all of this. A few former clients reached out after seeing Luna's cryptic social media post. They didn't ask questions. In fact, some trusted me more because I had kept everything private for so many years. A renowned fashion designer contacted me to authenticate a personal collection of vintage jewelry for an upcoming exhibition in New York. A major European museum invited me to collaborate on a project to restore a lost 18th century treasure. I hired 2 new appraisal experts, expanded our Denver office, and signed partnership agreements with 3 international auction houses. At a strategy meeting, my CFO hesitated before saying, "We're in a position to acquire a smaller competitor in the South. If you're ready, Isabel, this might be the time to expand our influence." I smiled. I had never pursued power. What I had sought from the beginning was freedom. One early morning, I sat at my second-story window, a cup of black tea in my hand, watching the mist roll in over the lake. Grandma was outside watering the plants, still wearing her favorite sky-blue cardigan. She stayed with me longer than planned, and I didn't stop her. "Do you know what I'm most proud of?" she asked me one night as we sat in my office sorting gemstones. I nodded. She didn't say career or wealth. She just said that I stayed true to my values, even when the price was high. That phrase stayed with me for days. I thought about all the times I'd kept quiet so as not to hurt others, the nights I'd come home with heavy shoulders, thinking I had to be enough to be noticed, the years I'd strive to be useful just to be seen. Now I didn't need validation from anyone, because I'd already proven to the one person who mattered most to me that I was enough. One day, while going through the inventory for restoration, I came across the pale lavender stone swan hairpin that my grandmother had kept in that old box. I had kept it for years, not for its monetary value, but because it marked the beginning of everything. I wrapped it in a blue velvet box and wrote a little note on the card. "To the girl who once felt invisible, you have become the kind of light no one saw coming." I placed that box on the top shelf of my private gallery as a reminder that my journey did not begin with privilege. It began with being forgotten. Not long after, I received an invitation to speak at an international conference on heritage and valuation in Paris. For the first time, I did not hesitate. I no longer feared what people might think or worried that walking on stage would make anyone in my family feel small. I was using my real name for the company I had built from the ground up. I was wearing the white gold ring my grandmother had given me, and I wore the quiet pride of someone who had been forgotten but had never forgotten who she was. Sometimes the best thing we can do is to distance ourselves from our family And that is what Isabel's story reminds us of, because those who should have supported her only wanted the money. But she knew how to value the person who supported her and the opportunities she was given to improve herself.